Okay. Okay. So as I was telling in the last lecture that I will be discussing about the photolithography today, and basically what we say that lithography is now the heart of the IC fabrication. But in this field, we basically see lithography as a method where we transfer our circuit design from a master pattern. Okay, so from that master pattern, we transfer that one, and then mm, we transfer it from the pattern on a wafer or a substrate, whatever you may say. So this method we say to be the lithography, which is now, you can say, obviously the most important part of the life in the semiconductor industry. Now, out of various type of lithography, basically you can say that they can be classified into four main parts. One is the optical lithography, where you use the source as light. You have e-beam lithography, where electron is the main source. You also have ion beam lithography and soft lithography. In the soft lithography, you are using basically the mechanical contact, where indentation is used to transfer the patterns. In all the cases, you are transferring patterns. You are creating a pattern according to your desired circuit, but you are just following different, you can say, different source for transferring the patterns. So you have to have a design at first, and then you have to make the pattern accordingly, and you are using basically the lithography as a tool. Now, what a lithography mean? Actually, the word came from two Greek words. One is lithos, meaning stone, and another is graphein, meaning to write. So this word actually have a meaning which is stone writing. This is because in the, you can say, ancient times, that you people used to draw or transfer some drawing from one part to the other by, uh, you can say, transferring by using the stone as the main pattern writer, or the, you can say, the master pattern, where stone is used as the master pattern. So that was used mainly for artistic point of view. Now if we go to the historical part, this was invented well back in 1798 by Senefelder. And that time, the method or the technology actually uses the process of repellent nature of oil and water to displace the design from one medium onto a flat surface. In that time, the positive part of the image would be a hydrophobic chemical like oil, and the negative part of the image was normally the water. So basically the oil and the water actually creating the contrast. You can make colorful images also by mixing dye in this oil and water combination. So that was the basic process, and that invention was mainly meant for printing technology, not for our semiconductor device industry. Now, a major progress then came up in 1935, when first negative photoresist was developed at Eastman Kodak by Louis Minsk. And then in 1940, Otto Suez developed the first positive photoresist. So obviously this development of photoresist, I will come later on what is a photoresist, that was obviously a milestone for today's lithography. And then there are various progresses, and you can say the technology that was extensively used in printing and art field became a very popular technique in the semiconductor industry. And in the present day, whatever development in the electronic device that we see or that we have discussed in my last lecture is mainly because of the progress in the lithography. Now the question is, why this lithography become the bread and butter for the semiconductor industry? It was mainly meant for printing, and the artistic point of view, the printing industry was mainly using this technique. But why it suddenly become bread and butter for the semiconductor industry? Now, if you look back around 1950s, A US Navy aircraft normally carries, normally carried 3.5 lakh electronic devices, and those were all manually connected. What do you mean by manually connected? That means they were having wirings and shoulder joints, and number of shoulder joints can go up to tens of millions. So you can understand how much shoulder joints will be there if in such type of equipments that the Navy aircraft will carry. Now that creates degradation in the efficiency of the equipment. And these actually raise a demand for miniaturized system where you can avoid joints and wirings. So if you look again, a group of, you can say chemists, uh, formed a NPN structure in 1955. They basically inject two type of dopants, P and N dopants, by diffusion technology. And later on, not later on, actually during that time, two engineers from Bell Lab, one is Frucht and another is Derrick, give a new idea. What they propose is that you can have selective area doping. How that can be done? You can grow an oxide over silicon. Obviously, there is a native oxide, but you can grow an oxide, as I have shown earlier, that there is a process of growing oxide on silicon wafer or any other substrate also you can grow. Okay, so if you grow an oxide, then you make a window out of it by etching the oxide over the silicon, and then you diffuse the dopant. What will happen? The region where the window has been created, there the doping will be formed, whereas the oxide on the other region will create a protective layer for the doping. So obviously this will create a, you can say, selective doping regions. Now this concept was later utilized by Andrew and Bond at Bell Lab uh, later in that year. And in 1957, Lathrop and Null of the US Army's Diamond Ordnance Fuse Labs created a miniaturized transistor on a ceramic substrate and first coined the term photolithography. So you can see how the concept of lithography came within the semiconductor industry or the electronic device people from a printing medium. So this is, you can say, a change of the concept from printing part to the semiconductor industry part or the electronic device part. Okay. So nowadays, obviously, you cannot do anything without photolithography. You obviously create thousands and lakhs of components within a single chip simultaneously on a single wafer by this process. And the smallest dimension that you can produce, not easily maybe, but you can produce, is 50 nanometer or around that. So that can be produced by photolithography in today's context. Okay. So what are the basic steps for photolithography? There are, as any other processes we normally see, there are obviously some steps that we have to follow to do the photolithography. The first step is the coating of a sensitive polymer, which we call resist, on your substrate or wafer. Then you have to expose that polymer uh, through a mask where you have the predefined circuit design. Then after you expose it, you have to develop it. I will come later on about all the details. And then finally, after you develop, you will do etching or depositing some material or doping, whatever you require. So that obviously the last part will be according to your requirement. Okay. Now, whenever you have to do a photolithography, what are the things that you need in your lab? For a photolithography, you need an optical source. Obviously, that is the source that will be used in a photolithography. You need a mask. That means a design over some uh, or you can say the pattern should be having some design of your circuit or whatever you want to transfer on the wafer. So that is called a photo mask. Then there should be a good quality resist, which is also called photoresist in this case. An alignment system. Alignment system is mostly required in device type of laboratories where you have several layers one top on the other, or maybe side by side where you have to stitch different layers on a single wafer. In that case, alignment system is very much required. And another requirement for device fabrication and mainly photolithography is a clean room. Most of the time, since you are making or using photolithography as a tool for device fabrication, you cannot do that without a good clean room. Okay. Now the question is, what is a clean room? I think Dr. Panda has discussed more about clean room in his previous talk. So I will not go into much details in that. Just I want to say that clean room is a controlled environment which can be artificially produced and are artificially produced to protect your samples from pollutants like airborne pollutants or particles and chemical vapors mostly. And I have experienced in you can say installing one clean room at Essenbos Center, and obviously have used that. So based on that, I have some experience in working in that. And the main requirement of this clean room is because you are making devices which are in the nanometer region, whereas your dust particles or whatever the contaminants you are having and in the micron size. So obviously, if a single dust falls on your device, then you can understand how many components will be destroyed. So that is the main problem which people face while doing device fabrication. So that's why clean room is very much needed while devices were fabricated or are fabricated during this. Now that the main factors that should be controlled is the rate of air, direction of flow, humidity and temperature of the room, and the most important is the number of particles per unit volume of the environment of the clean room or the room what you are making it. So I will not go into details because that has been discussed. There are basically two type of standards that are used. One are called federal standards and another is ISO standard. You can see ISO has 9 classification, whereas federal has only 6 classification. And let's say for 1000 federal standard, it is equivalent to 6 standard for the ISO. Now for the federal standard, it is very easy to understand what it is because this number actually designate number of particles in cubic feet of the volume of the room, which is having particles of size more than 0.5 micrometer. So that's very easy. That means, let's say I say it is a class 10 clean room. What does it mean? That means a unit volume, which is 1 cubic foot of volume of the room, will have only 10 particles whose size is above or equal to 0.5 micron. So that's it for the ISO part. Sorry, for the federal part. Whereas for the ISO classification, there are 9 parts, and you can understand that these were not same as the federal one. Federal one were very easy, 10, 100,000 and so on. But for this ISO part, that is a complex numbers. That means 2370, 23700 and so on. That actually is based on a formula where C corresponds to the concentration of the particle in the room, that is equal to 10 to the power 9 into zero point 0.1 by d to the power 2.08, where d represents the particle diameter and n represents the ISO class. That means if it is ISO 5, then n will be 5. And if you consider, let's say, particle of 0.5 micron, then d will be 0.5 micron. So if you do this calculation, you will get that value of 3520 corresponding to that ISO class. So this is what the ISO thing means. So I will not go into details. So I will skip. These are the dresses that people use. Then the clean room furniture should also be specific, and you have to enter the clean room by various processes. You cannot just enter into a clean room like that. There has to be one manager for a clean room who will look after all the things. That means how the person who is entering or leaving is following some rules or not, whether the clean room is working properly. Mainly the clean room should be cleaned rigorously every day. So all these things has to be taken care of by a manager. And there has to be a design. So normally the design is that initially one enters the ante room where they take their dresses and then enter the main part. And normally what happens, the ante room will be a higher side on the classification, and then the main part will be on the lower side. That means like what we have installed, our ante room part were 10,000 classroom. Then we entered into 1,000 classroom, and the local region where we used to do the lithography part where you can say around 100 classroom. So this should be the plan. That means the main part will be the best region, whereas the ante room and the other parts will, you can more or less compromise, because uh, there is a cost effectiveness also there. uh, as much as you go low in the concentration of the particle, the costing of the whole system will increase a lot. So that is the main thing. And also you have to maintain the pressure difference. That means the innermost part where it is the lowest concentration of dust particle will be the maximum pressure. Otherwise what will happen, whenever you are opening the door, due to the pressure difference, the dust from the higher concentration region will enter into the lower concentration region. So that should not be done. So the pressure inside the best room should be higher compared to the lower concentration, lower graded one. So these are the things, and I will not go into details. Another thing is there should be, obviously a clean room has to be cleaned because of some of the filters. One is called HEPA filter, which is high efficiency percolated air filter, and another is ultra low penetration air filter, which is called ULPA filters. So I just instead of talking much about those, I will show just a video which may give you some idea about this. So this is how a clean room looks like. So you can see all the equipments or whatever the things are all made of stainless steel, so that they doesn't give rise to any dust particles. So this I can skip because that you have seen earlier. So these are the HEPA filters. And these mainly trap all the particles which is above 0.3 micron. So there should be sufficient flow of air through the HEPA filters. Normally HEPA filters are placed in the ceiling part. Okay, this part is very important. We normally shed lot of dust particles and even hairs. So if you see this one, we normally shed, if we stand, we normally shed 1 lakh particles per minute. Now, if we move, then the number of particle shedding will be more. So it is always not permitted to move very fast inside a clean room. So one should obviously has to move, but should move very slowly. Sorry. Okay. So so one has to enter inside the clean room with a dress which nowadays people know because of the pandemic situation, which is also called PP. So every portion of the body should be covered. We should not enter the clean room with any cardboard, any paper, any pencil type of thing. Okay. The floor you will see, that is called a sticky mat, that we normally place whenever someone enters that. Now sticky mat will stick all the dust particles on your foot or whatever you are shedding. So this is exactly what we now see the doctors are doing whenever they are treating the COVID patients. Okay. Okay. This is how a clean room looks like, but this clean room is mainly meant for photolithography. Uh, what is the difference between the other clean room, what I show, and this one? The main difference is the color. You can see this is yellowish color. This is because you are using some resist or some polymer while you are doing the photolithography. Now that polymer is light sensitive. That's why you cannot use normal white light inside a clean room where you are actually doing the photolithography part. So whatever you have to do, obviously you cannot make it fully dark. So best way is to make it yellow, because yellow color will not hamper the resist as the white light does. Because normally a white light contains all type of colors, even some UV also. Now UV will damage the resist most, whereas the yellow color will damage or you will react with the photoresist least. So that's why if you enter any clean room where photolithography is performed, you will see the room to be yellow in color like this. Okay. So now I go mainly to the photolithography part, and if you see how the system or the schematic of the system looks like, You are having a light source, it is passing through a mask and through a lens and then on a substrate where the patterning is done. Now, this I have told before also, that the main three basic steps will be coating the substrate with the resist, then expose it through the mask, and then developing. Now, I was talking about resist for long. Now, that is also called a photoresist whenever we are doing the photolithography. Now, what is a resist actually? It is basically a mixture of an organic compound and a solvent solution. And there are two type of photoresist which are used. One is called a negative photoresist and another is a positive photoresist, and it depends, or you can say the classification depends on how it reacts with the light. Now, this is the main thing. Whenever you are talking about the negative photoresist, it becomes insoluble after it is exposed. That means, let's say you are having some resist and you expose it with light. Now you try to develop it. What will happen? You will see that the region which you have exposed will not get dissolved, but the unexposed part will get dissolved. Then you understand that that is a negative photoresist. When just the opposite thing happens, that is a positive photoresist. That means in that case, the soluble part will be the exposed region. That means where the region where the resist gets reacted with the light will get soluble when it is inserted in the developer solution. However, the best resolution you will get with the positive photoresist, but negative photoresist is mainly used by people like us who need cheaper, you can say, technology, because we are not making thousands of device in a single chip or so on. Our structures are not also always 50 nanometer or 100 nanometer. Our structures are in the range of micron whenever we are doing photolithography. So for that, negative photoresist, which are much cheaper compared to the positive one, are okay for us. But in whenever we are going for a nanometer range dimension, then positive photoresist will always be better solution. Okay. Now, just we are differentiating the thing again by a pictorial form. Now you can see initially you have a photoresist on a substrate, then you place a mask and then light is falling or made to fall on the photoresist through a mask. Mask means you are having an opaque region, that is the black region is the opaque region and the other transparent region through which the light can pass. Now, as we have discussed just now, the region which is exposed in case of negative photoresist will not dissolve. That means it will remain there. Whereas the unexposed part will get dissolved. That's why the blue region, which is unexposed, get dissolved and you will get a window out in case of a negative photoresist. Whereas just the opposite thing happens in the positive photoresist, and you see the blue region remains while the green region gets dissolved in the developer solution. So this is the basic difference between a negative and a positive photoresist. I hope this picture will help you to understand what's the main difference between a negative photoresist and a positive photoresist. Okay. So what are the main compositions? The organic molecule is the polymer. You need a solvent because it is basically a liquid form or a semi-liquid form thing. So polymer has to be dissolved in a solvent. A sensitizer has to be there because otherwise how will it be get sensitized in presence of some source or light source, and there will be some additives so that it gets stick well with your sample surface. So you have the solid solid organic material uh, is the main part, and you can change the solubility by using the solvent and then expose it with the UV light, and obviously as depending on positive and negative photoresist, the sensitizer will be accordingly. Okay. Uh, the main polymer for the negative photoresist is polyosprene, and for the positive one is a resin. And photoreaction for the negative polymer is polymerization, whereas for the positive one is photosolubilization. Obviously that you understand as we have discussed in our last slide. Okay, for the sensitizer, the negative one is provided with free radicals for polymer cross-linking, because this will actually cross-link your polymer so that after getting exposed, it gets polymerized. Whereas for the positive one, the sensitizer actually change the film to base soluble, so that that region gets soluble in the developer solution. And there are some dyes which are added also sometimes. Okay. Again, I go back to the basic steps. The main basic steps will be obviously the wafer cleaning that we have discussed in my last lecture. That has to be done first. Then you have to do some baking, because you are cleaning that, you are drying that, but still you have to bake it first. That means bake means you have to heat it first. After you heat it, you have to spin coat a primer over the wafer. Now that is not always done. Like when I myself have done photolithography, I normally haven't used primer always, but sometimes it is better to use a primer so that the polymer gets stuck well with your wafer. Just primer is helping to stick the polymer or the photoresist over the wafer. So first coat the primer and then the polymer. Then there will be another baking. Obviously, then the main part, that means alignment and the exposure, then development, and you have to inspect. That means whatever the design you want, whether that has transferred on your resist coated sample or not. After it, you see that it is okay, then you have to do another final baking. So that is the basic steps. I will go through the steps again. So let's say you have a sample which can be a plain silicon wafer, or it can have a oxide over it. Whatever, you will have to clean it first. You have to do the rigorous cleaning as we have discussed earlier. Then do some baking, as I have told, that you after cleaning you have to heat it up, or which is called pre-bake, and then coat it with primer. Normally this coating the sample with primer is done by vaporization. So you uh, actually vaporize a primer solution over the substrate, so that a very thin layer of primer, it should be very thin, a very thin layer of primer gets coated over your sample. Okay. Now you have to coat the main thing, that is your photoresist. Now, how will you coat? Now, the main part of this coating, you need a spin coater. Many of us, maybe many of you also is having a small or big, whatever, spin coater in your lab. Now, this spin coater, you yourself can also make yourself. Just what you need is a motor which can be uniformly rotated at a particular speed. You need a vacuum chunk so that it can hold your wafer or your sample on a plate. Just that you need. Okay. Otherwise, commercial spin coaters are available and they are not very costly, at least up to the level level where we work. That means we don't work with a 12-inch wafer or a you can say 8-inch wafer. We normally work with a small piece or maximum 2 to 3-inch wafers. So for that, a small spin coater is just enough, and that is available within a lakh. So otherwise, I have seen people make their own spin coater using just a motor and a vacuum pump. Okay. The speed that are normally kept are around 3000 RPM. Obviously, that you have to make your own recipe. That means how much speed you have to use, that you have to make your own by doing some initial works. That means how much resist thickness you need, that you have to calibrate first by various resist concentration in a solvent, and then using various speed of the spin coater and find out the thickness of the spin coated resist over the silicon by process like ellipsometry and so on. So after you know that resist thickness, you can fix your speed and always use that speed from then onwards. Okay, now you put your wafer on a chunk or a plate. Now this chunk has to be connected with a vacuum pump, because vacuum pump is required because you have to keep the wafer strongly, you can say, bind on the chunk. Otherwise, whenever it will spin, the wafer will fly away. So that is very important. You cannot just stick it with glue on a chuck, and whenever you will try to pull it off, the wafer will break. So the best way to do is to use a vacuum pump through a, and place the wafer on a chuck which will have a hole. So what will happen, the vacuum will pull the wafer on the plate, and whenever the thing will spin, the wafer will not fly away. Okay, now put your photoresist solution, normally either through a nozzle or using a dropper on your wafer, and then you start rotating the spin coater at your desired speed at as you have find out. And based on the centrifugal force, the solution will spread on, it will coat on the wafer uniformly. Only thing you will see, just at the edges of the wafer, the uniformity will not be very good, and obviously that region you have to uh, avoid. That means you should not keep some important design on the edges of a wafer. So the main design should be within the central region, or at least within, you can say, 1 or 2 millimeters within the edge of a wafer, if it is a larger one. So this is the part initially you have to do. That means initially you have to clean a wafer, you have to bake the wafer at a on a hot plate. You can put a primer on it, or you can avoid it, but this part you cannot avoid because you have to coat a photoresist over the wafer like this. Okay, so you have a primer and the photoresist coated over your sample. Next, you have to bake it. Now, you need just a hot plate, nothing else. You can make 90 degree to 100 degree in a hot plate, and just place the uh, wafer coated with your photoresist over it. What will it do? It will just evaporate the solvent inside the resist, and it will actually used mainly to remove the solvent from the resist. So this is required, and this is called a soft baking. So after soft baking, you can understand the resist thickness will decrease a bit because you have removed some of the liquid part from that. Okay. So up to this is over. That means you have done the coating part. Now comes the most important part. That means your exposure of your wafer or the photoresist coated wafer with some light source, and it should be exposed through a design. Okay, so there are various light sources that has been used, and accordingly there is a progress. Now if you see in the early 90s, the line width, or you can say the smallest line width that were make were around 350 nanometer or 400 nanometer. But later on, the line width start decreasing. Okay, so around that time in the early 90s, the main source of light were mercury lamp. So mercury lamp and G line and I line of the mercury lamps were used for that, and you can not easily, but you can achieve a line width of around 400 nanometer. But whenever there was a need to go below that size, mercury lamp with a wavelength of 436 or 365 nanometer was not enough for that. Then comes the use of laser. Then KRF laser was used, where have a wavelength of 248 nanometer, and using the KRF laser in the late 90s, a line width as small as 150 nanometer was achieved. But obviously semiconductor industry, as we have seen earlier, that has gone down to a more miniaturization. That means your device size has reduced a lot. So 150 nanometer is not the limit. Next comes around 70 nanometer, 60 nanometer era. And that time again, KRF was not used. People go for ARF laser, which has a lower wavelength, which is 193 nanometer. And then at present, we have gone down to 20 nanometer, though that is very rare case of going to 20 nanometer using photolithography, but that has been achieved in rare cases. And that has been achieved using ARF immersion lasers, and where and F2 lasers also with a wavelength of 157 nanometer. So this has been a progress you have can see from 90s to the present situation in case of the light sources. Okay. Next, what you need obviously is the design pattern. Now, that are called photomask. That is the template through which you have to expose your resist coated wafer with the light source that you have. So let's say you have some UV light source, whatever UV light source you are having in your lab, but you have to have some mask or a design. Otherwise, what will you transfer on your resist coated wafer? So that should be a design. So you have to draw a circuit design using CAD, and then transfer that design on some uh, template. Now, normally a photo mask are chrome coated glass. That means you have a glass or a quartz substrate, and that is coated with chrome. That means chrome acts as the opaque region of your mask. Okay, so you can see a image or a photographic image of a mask here. You can see actually those are the electrodes on all the sides. There are electrodes with let's say size of 500 micron, which are easily visible, and then lines are coming inside from those larger pads. Actually, those larger pads are used so that obviously whenever you are making a device, you have to put your probe for the on the pads. So the probe size are not in the nanometer region. So that has to be in the micron size. That means the probe tip will be in the micron size. So you should have a pad which should be more than your tip of your probe. So you can see all the larger pads, which are basically the pads where you put your probe, whereas the line going inside is to connect your main component or the device that you are trying to make in using the lithography. So this is just a simple mask where you have black region, which is the chrome, whereas the white region or the yellow region are the transparent region. You can also see some cross marks. These are basically alignment marks, because you may need alignment later on. So cross or various other signs are also used as a alignment mask. So these are the masks that are used. Now comes the mask aligner. So obviously the mask aligner will have a source, which are mainly the UV light. You have to place a substrate. There should be a substrate holder. And then obviously there should be a mask holder also. So a source on the top, then comes the mask holder where the mask will be placed, and at the bottom there will be a substrate holder where the substrate will be placed. You can see the image where you can see the mask, you cannot see the wafer which is below that mask, and UV light is falling on the you can say the wafer through the mask. Okay, so this is one of the image of a full mask aligner. So this is the schematic of a mask aligner. So as I was telling, there will be a mask holder, there will be a wafer chuck. That means you have to keep your wafer on it, and it should be tightly placed. So that's why the wafer chuck in this case is also a vacuum chuck. As you have seen in the spin coater case, it was a vacuum chuck. In this case also that has to be a vacuum chuck, because if it is a slightly misplaced, that means if it moves even slightly, the whole thing will get damaged. Whole thing will get damaged. Even a simple vibration may cause a damage in the photolithography. So that should not be done. So that has to be strongly hold over the chuck by using vacuum. There will be a microscope. That microscope normally helps you to align with the alignment marks. Then you have to position your wafer and the mask accordingly. So that has to be a positioner. That means there should be uh, you can they say the motors to move it in the XYZ plane, so that you can move them in your desired position. And there should be a timer so that you can say that how much time you want to expose your resist in the UV light. Now this thing also depends upon the resist thickness. That means if your resist thickness is more, your timing should be more, but it is always better to have thinner resist with a lower time if you want to achieve a lower dimension. If you want to achieve a dimension of, let's say, 100 micron or so, then your resist thickness can be more and timing can be also more. But otherwise, if you want to go for a lower dimension, always try for a thinner photoresist, and your exposure time also should also decrease accordingly. Okay. So this mask alignment is obviously a very important part whenever you are making some device or some any other, whether it is a device or any circuit over a wafer. This part is the most important. Initially you have to place your wafer on the wafer chuck, and there has to be a wedge compensation. That means there may be a slight tilting between the wafer and the wafer chuck. So there is a way by using pressure that this wafer and the wafer chuck will be parallel to each other, and there will be no tilting. So there is a way to do that. Also there is a Z alignment system using motor or stepper motor. Using all these steps you can make that the wafer is well hold over the wafer chuck. Also you have to keep in mind that the mask also should be well placed. There should also be no angle between the mask and the wafer. So that also should be checked well, that they are also well parallel. The mask is well parallel with the wafer. So all these things has to be keep in mind. Now for the alignment procedure, there is obviously, as I told, there should be a microscope, and your objective microscope should there are two objective microscope, obviously the left one and the right one, and both of them should be used, and there should be markers. As you have seen earlier, we have used cross marking for mask alignment, and those marking are normally when the wafer and also on the mask. Obviously, whenever you have to align two things. So one alignment mark should be on the wafer, and one alignment mark should be on the mask also. So now let's say they are not aligned. So that you can observe using your microscope. So let's say the shadow portion of the mark, the cross mark, is the one which is on the wafer, and the darker cross mark is on the mask. So you see, obviously they are not matching. So you have to move your wafer accordingly using the motor, or you can move the mask also using the normally you have to use the motor to move the wafers. Masks are also can be moved, but mostly we keep that fixed. We normally play with the wafer part, and then we start aligning that. So first, load the mask, load the wafer, use the microscope objective to do the mask alignment. If they are not aligned, move the wafer so that the alignment mark get close to the mask alignment mark. Whether you have to move it in the XY plane, you have to move like that. If you have to rotate it, you have to rotate the wafer so that it gets matched up. And then using both XY coordinate, if it gets matched, then you can do the exposure. So this is the main procedure that uh, you can say a mask alignment part has to be done while doing this one. So you now align the mask and expose it through a UV source, and then again you have to bake it. So again you have to bake it. Now this baking is just to evaporate the rest of the liquid solution which still remains. So you make it hard, and that's why that is called hard bake. So this hard baking will be just a bit more temperature. That means if you keep 90 degree to 100 degree in soft baking, you can keep 110 or 115 degree for the hard baking part. And then the developing. That means you have done soft baking, you have exposed that after all these alignments and all those things, do the hard baking, and then put your exposed wafer in a solution which is called developer solution. And the most common developer solution is TMAH, which is tetramethyl ammonium hydroxide. So that solution is mostly used for developing the resist coated wafer or the samples to uh, have that circuit design transferred on it. So normally, as I told, that TMAH is mostly used. It is mostly used for the positive PR. Xylene are also used for the negative PR. However, TMAH can also be used in the negative PR. Xylene will give you the best result, but TMAH can be used also in case of a negative one. After you develop it, you have to clean it. Now, if you use TMAH, you can just simply clean it with DI water. Or if you clean it with if you develop it with xylene, then you have to use butyl acetate. Otherwise, normally as we use developer as TMAH, then we rinse this with DI water, not only once but at least twice or thrice after the we place it in the developer solution for 5 to 10 minutes. Actually, how much time you should keep in the developer solution also is an experience, because if you keep it long, you will see it will be overdeveloped. Now, if you keep it less, it will be underdeveloped. So that situation has you have to control, and that obviously will you can gather by experience only. That means how much time you should keep, that you have to experience and then use that time for that. So as you see, the first image shows a normal development. That means after you develop with the photoresist, the region, some region, yeah, the photoresist still remains, whereas in a window has been created which is having a sharp boundary between the photoresist and the window. So there is a more or less sharp boundary, and that is called normal development. That is the best development profile. Now, if you do it very less time. That means you keep the sample in the developer for a less time. What will happen? It will be incomplete development. That means even in the window region, you will have a small portion of photoresist. That means now it is not of any use. That means it cannot be used further, because in the whole region you have the photoresist. Maybe in some region it has lower thickness, in some region it has a thicker one, but it is of no use. Another thing is called underdeveloped. That means you have achieved the development, but still you have to do that. That means the edge is not sharp enough. So this is called underdevelopment. That's why you can see you have a wedge shape at the boundary. Whereas if you do it more, the boundary region, there will be etching out of the photoresist also where it should not be. So this is called ever developing, and you should avoid this one. Otherwise what will happen, if you do an over developing, your size will increase. Let's say you try to make 200 nanometer by 200 nanometer pad. Now, if you do an overdevelopment, this 200 nanometer may go up to 250 nanometer by 250 nanometer. So you can understand how much error it will be incorporated. Now, if you are doing with 100 micron by 100 micron, then overdevelopment will not be a much factor. But if you are working in the nanometer region, or size or the dimension in the nanometer range, then this overdevelopment will be a problem. So better to avoid that. Whereas obviously you cannot do an incomplete development, because that will actually make the whole process useless. The whole process what you have done from the starting point of cleaning the wafer to the post baking and developing, whole process will be of no use, because the photoresist still exists, and whatever you do after that will not create any pattern on the substrate. Okay, so let's say you have done a good development, and you will see only a region of photoresist still remains on the pattern, on the sample, and from the other region photoresist has dissolved in the developer solution. And obviously you have to do the pattern inspection. That means in open or naked eye you cannot see well. Obviously in the naked eye you cannot see whether there is an error in 1 micron pattern or less than that, or whether there is underdevelopment or incomplete development. All this you cannot observe in the naked eye. So for that you have to do a pattern inspection under a microscope, and after you are confident enough that okay, the development is fine enough, then you can go further for your final work. So final work is your hard baking, and after you do the hard baking, you are ready with the final procedure. Hard baking, as I have told you, it should be a bit more. If you are using 90 to 100, you can use 110 degree for hard baking. Okay. After you do this, a pattern has been generated, but this is pattern with photoresist. So photoresist should not be there in a device. Photoresist is just a polymer that is helping you to transfer a design. So then what you have to do, either you do a lift off process or you can do a etching process. Now what is a lift off process? Let's say you have make a window. Now you want to do a metal padding. So you want metal pads, maybe gold pads or silver pads, whatever, in the window region. What will you do? Now you will take your developed resist coated silicon in some chamber, and then do a deposition or some metal deposition, which can be a thermal deposition or something else. Now after you get deposit, obviously the metal will get deposited all over. Whether there is photoresist, where there is no photoresist, metal will not see that, metal will get deposited all over. Now you have to put that in a acetone solution, or basically a pure acetone. Acetone actually kills the organic material. That means it will remove the polymer. And when it removes the polymer, it will remove the metal on top of it. So when the polymer gets dissolved, the metal over the polymer will also move away and get washed out. So only the metal that is on the wafer, which is deposited through the window, remains there. And this process is called lift lock. Though this is also not a very easy process whenever you going to a very smaller dimension. That means whenever you are working in the region of 100 to 100 nanometer or less, this lift off process is very crucial. This is because if your thickness of the metal becomes more, the metal will become a continuous film, whether it is on the resist or whether it is on the window. That means resist thickness and metal thickness should be keep in mind. Metal thickness should be less, much less than the resist thickness, so that this becomes a discontinuous film. You can see the third diagram here. You are having metal on the resist, you are having metal on the silicon also, but this is not continuous thing. And that's why whenever you are dissolving the resist and the metal on top of it will move out, but the metal on top of the silicon will remain, and this is the good lift off. But if the metal thickness is more and the metal film becomes a continuous film, then when the photoresist moves out, it will take the whole metal film off. And after you take it off, you will see just a plain silicon wafer with no metal pattern over it. So that is obviously again an experience that you need to do or need to achieve for this process. So this is again the same thin film patterning. It is not always that you have to do a metallization. You can deposit other films also, other thin films. As Dr. Panda has giving you lectures in thin film deposition today morning. So there are various thin film deposition. You can use various materials to be deposited as a thin film on your sample. So everything can be lift off, or the process of lifting off can be done for every thin film materials, not only for the metals. So first is the lithography, you do the patterning, then you do the etching part. Either you do the etching part or you do the metallization part and then remove the photoresist. So it can also be happen that you didn't do a lift off. What you can do, you just first on a silicon wafer deposit a metal or any other thin film material. So first you have the thin film, then you do all the processing of photolithography and then make a window, and then you do the etching. Then this etching can be a chemical etching if you know what chemical can etch your thin film, or you can do a reactive plasma etching also. That can also be done, reactive plasma etching or reactive ion etching. After you do that, you can see here that that etching will etch out the thin film through the window, whereas the polymer will act as the protective layer. Now you remove the polymer. Here the polymer is the bluish region, not the orangish color. Orangish color is the thin film. So now you remove the polymer in acetone. Then what will happen? You will leave the thin film as patterns. So both way you can do the patterning. So either you do the lift off, where you first make the all the processing with the photo lithography and make some windows, and then do the deposition, or first do the deposition, make the window, and then do the etching. So just two different process you can do for this one. Okay, now there are for the exposure part also there are different types. One is called contact printing, one is called proximity printing, projection printing, and step away. Now, contact printing is very much used in normal labs. Actually, that was used in the mid 70s or so. This is because it gives the best result. But the main problem is, though this is simple and cost effective and having a good resolution, but that creates a lot of defect because your mask and the wafer are in contact. Since these are in contact, both the mask degrades and also the polymer which is coated on the wafer also degrades, and that's cause defects due to contamination. So that's why later on people shift to this is basically the contact printing, where you can see the mask is just sitting on the photoresist. Okay, so that's why people go for proximity printing. What does it mean? Proximity printing means, that means the mask will not be in contact or it will not be in touch with the resist. It will have a slight gap, and the gap may be in the order of 10 to 20 micrometer. And since there is no direct contact, obviously the mask lifetime will be more. However, the resolution will be more than 3 micron. And the main error that occurs because of the diffraction error, I hope everyone know what is a diffraction. So whenever you have a slit and there is a light passing through a slit, if the dimension of the slit is comparable with the dimension, or the sorry, with the wavelength of the light source, then the diffraction occurs. So such type of error also occurs here. This because your light source have wavelength in the micrometer region. Again, the mask is having some opaque and transparent regions. That means they are having slits also. That actually acts like slits. So when this UV light is passing through this mask, then the edge will create a diffraction pattern, and that will also cause error in the patterning. So obviously contact printing has some problem, proximity printing also have some other problem. So if you want to know how much resolution you can achieve using the proximity printing, this is the formula where lambda is the wavelength of light used, T is the resist thickness. So obviously you can understand, if you increase the thickness of your resist, the resolution also increases. That means you cannot go to much lower level in case of a resolution. So if you have to achieve a thinner dimension or a lower dimension, your thickness, or that means the T has to be low, and G is the main gap. So if it is a contact printing, G will be 0. Otherwise, in this case, it may be 10 micron or 20 micron, whatever you have kept. So this is how a proximity printing is done in the photolithography. Okay. Then comes the projection printing. Actually, projection printing brings the concept using the overhead projector. We all in our departments have this projector, so we know how it works. So projection printing also use this concept, and they can go up to a resolution of 1 micron or even less using the projection printing. This is just the same as a projector has. That means the light source is make parallel with a lens, and when it pass through a mask, then you have to converge it using a projection lens over a photoresist. So that actually brings down the diffraction error, and also that doesn't have that contact error also. So it can avoid both the errors caused in the contact printing and the proximity printing. So projection system is a better solution for that. And using the projection system, you can scan it also. If you scan the thing over the photoresist, then you can make the pattern over the whole region of a wafer. If the wafer is also large enough, just by scanning the system, you can make the pattern over the whole region. Now this is the exactly what I was telling about the diffraction thing. So you can see the proximity one is showing a diffraction pattern, whereas the projection, the diffraction effect has reduced a lot. So if you compare the two, obviously it shows that the proximity compared to the proximity printing, projection printing is a much better solution. And this actually is based on the far field or the Fraunhofer diffraction, whereas the proximity printing is a near field one, which is the Fresnel diffraction. Okay. Now, nowadays, obviously, step and repeat projection printing are used. This is because in the device industry, people used with a larger device, let's say maybe 8 to 12-inch wafers. Now, you may have identical patterns over the whole wafer. That means in a single wafer, you will have lot of chips. So a single chip will have a particular design. Now, this particular design has to be replicated over the whole wafer region. So that's why this tape and repeat projection printing is very popular nowadays. So you expose a small region of the wafer, and then after this is exposed, you shift the wafer or the exposed region, and then again do the thing, or that means that you repeat that process in the neighborhood region. So in this way, basically these things occurs. You can see this one, you have a mask, and it has actually get reduced because of the projection lens. So whether your mask may have a larger dimension, so when you are reducing the size, you can do that in the Xerox copier also. You can reduce the size of the main thing. So similarly here also you can do that. So obviously the dimension will decrease. So you are using some dimension in the micron range, maybe 20 micron range in the mask, whereas after you do the projection, that may come down to 200 nanometer on the wafer. So that obviously help you, and you make a pattern on a smaller region. Next, you move the wafer. You see, you can move the wafer stage by some good motorized system. Now, after you, or you can have a piezo stage also. So after you move the wafer, then you expose the same pattern on your neighborhood region. So same patterns can be exposed in the whole region of the wafer, and you will have the same type of chip design on the whole wafer. So in a single go, you can have lot of chips in a 8 or 12-inch wafer. So that is the main advantage of this tape and repeat alignment exposure system, and that's why these are mainly used nowadays. So this is the main schematic of the thing. You have the interferometer laser system to have the alignment, because this movement of the wafer stage has to be very precise. Otherwise, there may be overlapping of the designs on one over other, and that will destroy the whole thing. And also it may happen that it has moved a bit more, and some region of the wafer will not be exposed. So some region of the wafer will go waste. So since this is a commercial thing, because people have to think commercially, so everything has to be very precise. So these interferometer lasers are used to check, or you have to see the precise movement of the wafer stage for this repeat and step and repeat alignment process. Okay, so this is how it looks. You can see all these small designs has been done by step and repeat process. So one design has been done, then it has been moved to the neighborhood. Again, the same exposure has been done, and you can see hundreds or thousands of same design is replicated on the single wafer. Similarly, on the right hand side also, you are having a dimension of around you can say 30 to 40 micron, and that dimension has been repeated in an array over the same sample or a wafer by this simple process, though it is not a simple but a process which is very popular. So I stop here, and I will run just a video for your entertainment, and we'll stop there. So before running this, I think Dr. Panda can distribute the question if you haven't done it already.
Yes, I will distribute. Okay.
So will I start the video, or will you distribute?
Yeah, please start. I'm distributing also.
Okay, okay. Thank you. So you can see a pattern has been performed over a silicon substrate using photolithography. So you have obviously need a photo mask which have the same design as you desire to have it on your silicon wafer. Okay. Normally this metal pattern on the photo mask is chrome or chrome gold. So you have a shadow on your wafer which is having the photoresist coating. Now you have to obviously do the design first in your CAD design to have the circuit. So this is one such mask that has been prepared by CAD design over a quartz substrate using chrome coated. The black things are chrome. Maybe a thin layer of gold is also there in to stick the chrome on the glass or the quartz. So as I have told that these are called contact photolithography, where the mask and the wafer will be in contact or they will touch each other. So this is spin coating process. You have to put some few milliliters of resist solution over the wafer and then spin it. You got a uniform coating. Now, if your coating is not good, non-uniformity will occur and your device quality will also get degraded. And you have to also check that there should be no air bubbles inside that drop. Whenever you are dropping through a dropper, there should not be any air bubble. So this cross section shows you have a photoresist over, let's say 1 to 2 micron over your silicon wafer, which is blue in color or bluish in color. So this is one of the mask aligner I have also shown you. Sorry. Okay. So you have some exposed area and that will change the chemical property of the polymer. So either it will be soluble or it will become insoluble depending upon whether it is negative or positive. So after it is done, you have to develop it. Obviously, there will be a soft baking in between. Now, after you remove the thing from the developer, you can wash it normally with deionized water and then dry it. You can see the patterns even in your naked eye, but may not be distinctly. So to check it, you have to bring it down under a microscope. So this is just at the very beginning. You have a clean wafer. You can see it is acting like a mirror. It's so clean, atomically smooth, that it is the best mirror you can have. And after you develop it, you can see patterns over it. Now it is easily seen. The patterns have been transferred. So So this is your chuck of the spin coater. You have a hole inside at the just at the center. Actually, that is connected with a pump. So whenever you place the wafer on the chuck and you switch on your vacuum pump, it will hold the wafer on the chuck. Now you should keep in mind that chuck is clean enough so that there is no tilting of the wafer on the chuck. Now you have to put the desired speed and time, and that can be programmed in a spin coating system. Okay. Now you are putting the photoresist, you are dropping the photoresist on it smoothly, very smoothly. No air bubble should be there. You see? Okay, now you switch on the motor. Now it is spinning, and you can see the extra resist flies off, and a uniform coating will be done. So after it is done, you take out that one and put it on a hot plate. This is for the soft baking. So during this baking, you are actually removing some of the solvents. Now after the evaporation of the solvent, obviously the thickness of the resist will decrease a bit. Okay. Now baking is done. That means soft baking is over. And this is a mask aligner. So you can make a program, that means how much time that will be exposed. So you can see 11.5 second is programmed here. This is a mask. So you are placing the mask. Already the wafer is placed below. Oh no, this is not the thing. This is the mask holder actually. The wafer is placed on the chuck and mask is placed in the holder, and now you are placing the mask. This is the wafer holder. So you have the mask holder, you have the wafer holder or the wafer chuck. Now expose it. The UV light will fall on the resist coated wafer, and just I will show you again. Just a minute. Just a minute. Okay. You just check it clearly. Wafer is first placed, and before that the mask was placed. Now whenever they will click the exposure button, you will check the wafer will move up and it will be placed as I have told in one of my slide. You can see the wafer is moving up because of the pressure gradient. So pressure will move the wafer up and keep the mask and the wafer at a particular desired distance. Now you are exposing it. Obviously, while you are doing this exposure, you should not look at it, or else you should keep a, UV protected glass. You should use a UV protected glass doing this one. Now exposure has been done for 11.5 seconds. Now you have to develop it. You put the developer in a petri dish, just simply a petri dish. I think everyone have in his lab who are doing experimental works. Now placing the wafer after getting exposed in the developer solution. Now if this is a positive photoresist, the region which is exposed will get dissolved in the developer solution and you will get windows. You can see even in your naked eye, you can see patterns formed. Now whether that things are well developed or underdeveloped or overdeveloped, that obviously you cannot see in your naked eye, so you have to use microscope. So you can see the same pattern has been replicated over the wafer as it is on the mask. Now you can remove the photoresist using acetone. But obviously before that you have to do some processing like etching, doping, metallization, thin film deposition, whatever you use. After that you have to remove it using acetone. Now you can see some very good patterns, disc-like patterns have been formed by after deposit in thin film, and those discs which may be a metal of 7 micron thickness. Okay. So thank you, and thank you for your kind attention. Now you can ask me some questions if you wish.
I already shared the question answer. It will be closed between 10 minutes.
Can you speak? I cannot hear.
Hello.
It is not audible to me.
Am I audible?
Can you can also write. You can also write because maybe there is some problem in the net or somewhere.
Hello.
Yes.
Yeah, I have already distributed the questions here.
Okay.
So I request all of you, please answer the questions between 10 minutes. And after that, sir will just answer all the questions. Because all of you are looking for the answer you told. So that's why I told. Please, Kostota, please you just wait for 20 minutes.
Okay, fine.
Thank you. If you guys have any question, please ask the question. He's there.
Yeah. So if you have any query regarding today's lecture or anything, you can ask me.
Yeah, of course, yesterday lecture also you can ask, not an issue. Yesterday sir lecture, you can ask.
Yes.
Kostota,
Yes.
do you have previous day questions answer set with you right now?
Previous question.
Yeah, last.
Yes. Yes.
Can you please answer them, all of them?
Sure. Sure. Should I answer it now or later on?
Just after 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay.
Just.
Okay. I can also ask the audience a question. Any of you in the audience is looking for doing some lithographic fabrication or so? They need any type of lithography for their own research work?
You people can unmute. You can
You can
speak with
answer
directly.
me.
Yeah, directly you can talk with Dr. Das.
May not be all will be using lithography, but some of you may be having the requirement of doing so. Even a very small type of circuit can be done. That means a very easy type of circuits can be done. But let's say you want to have a contact on your sample. Now, normally, if you just do a wear contact of soldering on film, it is not possible. So in that type of cases where your device is a thin film, you have to have some type of metallization over it, and the pads has to be there, and that contact has can be done by lithography if you want. That will obviously give a better result. So any of you have the plan to do so? No?
I think they are answering the question.
Maybe. Or maybe they are ready for the lunch.
Yes, but today already we are finished on time.
We are not late today.
Yes.
We are actually ahead of time. Or
That
the
is on
schedule.
time actually, you can see.
Mhm.
Because I keep actually 10 minutes for question answer for them. Yeah, I think, sir, you can please answer at least first yesterday one.
Okay.
Then, yeah, question as well as
Okay.
answer.
So the MCQ that was provided on the first day, that means on 2nd June, the first question was, if the number of transistors fabricated in a single chip is around 50,000, then what is the corresponding technology is? It is called VLSI. Okay, that is very large scale integration. Now Moore's law actually tells that the density of a component in a single chip will double every year. That means the option 1 or the A. That third question is also very easy. That means how much percentage of Earth's crust is having silicon or silicon compounds? That is 28%. That is answer is B. Okay. Now, if you want to dope, that is now the fourth question. If you want to dope silicon by p-type doping,
Sir,
then
actually their question order may be shuffled. Answer also may be shuffled. Just A, B, C may not be correct right now.
Okay, okay, fine. Okay, then I will just tell you
Yes.
the question and the answer, not the numbers.
Yes, yes.
Okay. There was a question where what type of doping material you have to use, or what is the dopant that you have to use if you want to dope silicon as p-type. Now here there are four obviously things are given: phosphorus, antimony, arsenic, boron. Out of this, boron will be the answer. Now why boron? Basically boron will create a hole because it is having 3+ at the outer shell, whereas silicon is 4+. That's why whenever there will be a bonding, there will be a hole in case of this type of bonding. So boron will be the answer for p-type of silicon. Phosphorus, antimony, arsenic all will create n-type silicon. Now there was also a question, which diameter of silicon wafer is not commercially available? This answer will be 10 inch. 8 inch, 12 inch, 18 inch are available commercially, 10 inch is not available. Okay. Now for deionized water, we check the quality of the water by its resistivity, and the resistivity of that deionized water is basically 18.5 or 18.2 mega ohm centimeter, not kilo ohm centimeter, it is mega ohm centimeter. Okay. There was a question about the Piranha solution. It is a mixture of H2SO4 and H2O2. That means sulfuric acid and hydrogen peroxide. So Piranha solution is a well-known solution, is a mixture of sulfuric acid and hydrogen peroxide in a particular ratio. Now, out of the 4 cleaning process, which one is the dry cleaning process? Ozone cleaning is the dry cleaning process, because in the other 3, RCA cleaning, Piranha cleaning, Megasonic cleaning, you need a solution or a liquid or a chemical. So only ozone cleaning is a dry cleaning process. So I think these are the 8 questions that were provided in my last lecture.
Sir? Hello? Sir?
Yes.
Can you repeat the answer for question number 2?
What was the question for your question number 2?
I think it was about after how many years, Moore's law.
Okay. Moore's law tells that the number of transistors or components per chip will double every year. Double every year will be the answer.
Okay.
I think Sudipta, Subhasri also looking for the same one, right? Every 2 years. Kostubha, can you please read the answer, read the message from Subhasri Ponda? Subhasri, you can talk directly also. That is the
Yes.
Yes, sir. Sir, in the PPT, it was written that the transition number will be doubled in every 2 years, not a single year.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I also noted that.
Is it?
Yes, sir.
But then it was not correct. If it was written that, it was not correct.
Sir, but we have selected the answer that one.
Okay. If you have selected, that's okay.
It's not an issue. Don't worry about it. Okay?
Yeah, that
You will
will
take
not be
care.
an issue.
More important is the learn it. That is the first important. Well, all of you, I hope all of you complete the today's answer. So I will close then we will sir will discuss the today's answer. Okay, Kostubha, please go ahead the today's answer.
Okay. So everyone has finished with the today's answer, I hope.
No
Okay.
answer, no? That's why they are answer already.
Hmm.
If they are not responding means they answer.
Yeah, obviously. Okay. In today's question, there was a easy question like lithography means stone writing, and this is according to the Greek word. So that was my, I think, the second slide where I have told that actually litho means stone and graphene means writing, which is a Greek. These two are the Greek words. Okay. Then lithography, which lithography use mechanical contact? That is soft lithography. In other way, photolithography use optical source. Electron beam lithography use electron beam as the source. Ion beam use ion or charged ion as the source of writing, whereas soft lithography use the mechanical contact for pattern writing. So the answer will be soft lithography. Okay. The smallest feature that a photolithography can produce is 50 nanometer. 50 nanometer, not 5 nanometer. Now, nowadays, you can go below 50 nanometer, but not 5 nanometer. But even it is very rare to have in the range of 10 to 20 nanometer in photolithography. Mostly it is 50 nanometer or above. Okay. Now, there are two standards or classifications in clean room. There is federal standard and ISO standard. Now, class 5 in the ISO standard corresponds to a federal standard of class that is your 100, class 100. So class 100 in federal standard corresponds to class 5 of ISO standard. Though this part I haven't touched today because I know that this has been discussed earlier. In another question, again regarding clean room, the federal standard class corresponds to number of particles per cubic feet with particle size which is 0.5 micron or above, mostly 0.5 micron. Okay, so it will be 0.5 micron. So let's say, as I have given the example also, that if I say 100 classroom, that means in cubic feet, you will have 100 particles of size 0.5 micron. There is another question that is a full form of HEPA filter. That's very easy. It is high efficiency particulate air. Particulate air. High efficiency particulate air. Okay. Next, soft bake. When it is performed? When the soft bake is performed? Before the resist coating, after the resist coating, or before development or after development? It is performed after resist coating. Okay. So various baking are performed during the whole process, but soft bake is performed after resist coating. And normally photolithography masks are made from chrome on glass. Okay, so the opaque part, which is the metal part, is of chrome. So chrome on glass or chrome on quartz, whatever you say, is most popular photolithography masks which are made from. So these are the answers. If you want, I can repeat some of the answers if you have missed those.
One thing, Kostobda,
Yes.
I think your slide was correct. The Moore's law is doubled every 2
Okay.
years.
Okay. So I have put the wrong answer there.
Yes. It's okay. Now I think I have changed.
No, actually, yeah.
It's
Actually,
18
when
months.
no, actually, what happens when mood started, that time it was double every
18
2
months.
years. Yeah, and after that, it has been checked that actually it is doubling in 18 months. Yes, yes.
Okay, Sudipta and
So whatever they have
Urvashi, both
answered
are
will
correct.
be okay.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's okay. It's a little bit controversial. It's not a law. That's why
Yeah, that is
people are.
not a law. That is
Yeah.
actually a result that people or actually semiconductor device people use the term Moore's law. Obviously, that is a result which has been extrapolated till now.
Yes, yes. Okay, is there any other questions about this test, today's test, or anything? Yes, Sudipta?
Sir,
Yes.
that question about when the soft bake is done, is it in the basic steps, the slide of the basic steps, there is written that it's before the development. So if I put the answer of before the development, will it be okay?
You see, actually there are 3 baking. One is just after you clean the wafer, you do a pre-bake. Okay.
Yes.
After you pre-bake, you have to coat it with the resist. Okay. After you coat it, you have to do a soft baking at 90 or maximum 100 degree in a hot plate, so that the liquid or the solvent part gets evaporated. This is just after resist coating. Okay. After you do that, you have to expose it. So you expose it, then after you expose it, you do the development. So after developing, you do the hard baking.
Yes.
So it is after resist coating.
Okay.
Normally before development, it is another step is there, which is exposure.
Yeah.
So that's why it is better to write after resist coating, not before developing. Obviously, pre-bake is also before developing, but long time before.
Yes,
that.
actually, it should be baked just after your photoresist coating. Just
Yes,
after.
exactly after. If you have to follow that video, they after just after spin coating, they place it over a hot plate. Just place it over a hot plate, and then expose it.
So that's why you have to write just after. This one, not
after, yes.
before. That is not before means how long before. That is not
Yes.
a lot of questions will be.
Okay, sir.
Okay.
Okay.